Hey everyone, thanks for joining. This is Laterally Office Hours on, what is today's date? September 25th. I'm doing a new positioning of TikTok, so I'm also streaming to TikTok, and I'm doing a new positioning of the camera today. So it's right here, so you can kind of see it on my LinkedIn, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook streams. You can kind of see the top of my phone right here. Also, I feel like I need the new iPhones because I feel like a wide angle would make a pretty big difference here. Yeah, so if you're on TikTok, let me know how this stream is. Also, I stream under the topic of science and technology. So it strikes me that learning to code is related to science and technology, but I also wonder if learning to code is part of education. So Twitch has a different like categorization for education. So would love to hear your thoughts if you think that streaming under education makes more sense than streaming under science and technology. That's just kind of one of those like opening statement, like question, kind of get out of the way early kind of things. So today the main topic is the trial by fire, in addition to, whatever y'all have to ask. So feel free to drop in, ask any question related to coding or technology, and we'll always pivot to prioritize y'all's questions. But a lot of times no one has a question. They just kind of want to see what I'm doing. So what I'm doing is the trial by fire. I love this term. This term kind of psych you up, right? This is throwing you into the deep end. So here's my Laterally course curriculum. So the trial by fire is the last step in the introductory section. So the introductory section, it's sort of an overview section. Before you actually learn to code, it's like, should I even be learning to code? It's like addressing that, as well as background information that you might want to have before you get into actually coding. So the trial by fire is diving into the deep end, and it's going 0 to 60 in 30 minutes to an hour. You will do some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript within 30 minutes to an hour. What's the point of this? So the point of the trial by fire is to get you a high-level vision of what we're doing when we build a website, when we build a web app. So for me, this is extremely useful because I want to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? I want to understand the big picture. And understanding the big picture is really what this first section, understanding the master plan, is all about. So a lot of understanding the master plan is doing things like why even get into tech? Why code? Why use a course or a coach instead of college or boot camp? So those are all big picture items. The last big picture item, the trial by fire, is an overview of code. So it's not background in the sense of non-technical. It's a technical overview, and this also helps because I feel that learning by repetition is really useful. So with the trial by fire, we're going to touch HTML, CSS, and JavaScript really quickly, and even Git and GitHub really quickly, and you're not expected to retain it. We're just going to do that one pass, and then we drive deep into HTML next. So this is the last step of the introductory period before we actually get to in-depth coding, right? So you're going to actually hit HTML twice by the time you get through that HTML section. And yeah, when you're slogging through HTML really slowly, I do think it can be kind of hard to see that light at the end of the tunnel. Like, why are we even doing this? So I want to give you the big picture visual up front first, and that's what this is about. All right, so let's dive into it. So the way that I do this, just one more piece of context. With the trial by fire, I actually have us code in Notepad. And two questions there, or two reasons there. So the question is like, why code in Notepad? There's two reasons. One is you don't need to set up anything. It's Notepad if you're on a Windows PC like I am right now. If you're on Mac, just text editor. So the first reason is that you don't need to set up anything. You don't need to install VS Code. You don't need to install Node. We're just using text file. And so one reason for that is ease of setup and familiarity. Most people have already messed with text editors like this, even if they weren't coding. The second reason is so that you feel the pain, basically, and that's part of the reason it's called the trial by fire. Like fire's kind of painful, right? So before I give you VS Code and I see and it like helps you do all these things, I want you to understand why it's helpful. So I want you to feel the pain before I solve that pain point. One of the problems I see with bootcamp graduates is that they will dive into a curriculum, they'll learn a framework like Angular or a rendering library like React, and they won't even know what problems they're solving. Like, why am I using React over vanilla JavaScript? So my curriculum is the opposite of that. You're going to understand all the foundational elements, vanilla JS, HTML, right? Even down to why am I using the VS Code IDE? Why am I using these extensions like Prettier and ESLint? So you're going to understand all of that, and it's only going to come on board when it's solving a pain point. So I actually start out just in the text editor specifically so that you realize how inconvenient it is, and that gives you an appreciation for how cool dev tools are. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's dive in. So I'm going to do Windows D, boom, hide everything, just go to the desktop. And this is a reenactment of something that I will do with a student, right? I actually do this in our first session. So I'll just do the trial by fire. It often takes more than 30 minutes to an hour. Sometimes it stretches across a couple sessions, and that's fine. So when I'm doing this by myself, obviously I can do it really quickly, and there should be no problem there. Once you've been coding for a couple years, you're going to be able to do this just as quickly. So I'm going to fly through it here, but just realize that like if I was working collaboratively with you, anytime you had a question, we would pause, address that question before moving on. And there really is not intended to be a time pressure here. So it's going to take me like 30 minutes to an hour. But if you're working with someone and it takes, a few hours, that's totally okay. The point of this is not to create a time pressure. Great. Okay. So with that, just right click, new text document. And I call this hello world.txt. Enter. And this is going to say hello world. In the top left, we can see an asterisk so that we know it's not saved. Control S to save it. And then what I asked the student to do, open up Google Chrome. So I'm expecting they're going to use Google Chrome. And just drag and drop the file into a new Google Chrome tab. Drag and drop it. And we see hello world. So a lot of people don't even know that you can do this. All right. So this is plain text. This is just a text file. Then what I asked them to do is write, and notice the way that this is styled. That's going to be important, the way it looks. And then I asked them to write H1, left angle bracket, H1, right angle bracket, and then to close, /H1. Boom, it's been 20 seconds and you wrote your first bit of HTML. Now come over here at 5. This is not what we want from an HTML document. So this is the key difference between an HTML document and a text file. So the text file will show these angle brackets. Now, let's close this file. Right click, rename, and change it to HTML. Boom. If you change the file name, it might become unusable. Are you sure you'd like to change it? Yes. So we're changing the format of the file, but we're doing this intentionally. Notice the icon changes to Chrome because now it's an HTML file. Another thing to notice here is that I'm showing extensions. If you are in, you might need to show your extensions if you've never done that before. So I'll just bring a folder over here. This is how to do it in Windows. Right click. So this is called Windows Explorer, this window that we're seeing in front of us that lets you view all these files and folders. It's called Windows Explorer. So open this guy up, right click in a white space right here. Notice if I left click, nothing is selected. Okay, that's how I know that I'm in a white space. It's a neutral zone. If I left click over here, it's going to select a folder. We don't want that. Because if I right click here, I'm actually right clicking on the folder. We don't want that. So click in a neutral zone, right click, properties. Then let's see, where do we go? Is it in advanced? Nope. Sharing. security. Oh, maybe it's not here. Okay, so let me right click on a folder then. Boom. All right, well, let's activate our #1 dev skill, Google. Show file extensions. File Explorer, View tab. Okay, so here we are in File Explorer, up at the top, View tab. Okay, there it is. File name extensions. I can check and uncheck that. So we want it checked. Okay, great. And so once the extension's showing, you can change it. Now it says hello world. Now we come back here, F5 to refresh the page. Oh no, it's not there. That's intentional. We need to change the extension from TXT to HTML. And now it looks different. And that is because this is being interpreted as an HTML file. It's not being interpreted as a text file. And notice that the H1 angle brackets, when it has a left angle bracket, something, and then a right angle bracket, that's called a tag, an HTML tag. And that is called the syntax of the tag. Syntax just means how we write it, the characters that we're using to write it. So the angle bracket is the syntax to indicate an HTML tag. And the browser knows that. That's what browsers do. They interpret HTML. So they understand that they are not supposed to show the, and then we can right click open with Notepad to get it back open. They know, the browsers know, Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, whatever. They all know what's called the HTML spec, the HTML specification, the way to read and write HTML tags, such as H1. So H1 is the largest heading tag. So this is a heading. Okay, so now we've literally got the basics of HTML. All we're going to do is we're going to learn a few new tags. And the point here is sufficiency, not mastery. I've been a developer almost 10 years. I think I speak for a lot of developers with a lot of experience when I say almost no one is a master of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We know how to learn things on the fly. If we get a new requirement, we know how to quickly understand the technical way to do that. And it's basically Googling. So we know how to seek out the solutions to various problems. We don't have all of this stuff memorized. Cool. Although there are some basics to learn, but like you don't need to memorize all the HTML tags. You just need to know how to look them up, which is just Googling. Cool, so now I've got the H1, and what I want to do from here is I want to get to a point where I use CSS and JavaScript. So first, we've got a heading. Let's now do a paragraph. This is another HTML tag. This is going to say, this is my first paragraph. We can do a section down here. So this is a semantic tag. What is a semantic tag? A semantic tag is a tag that is written using natural language. So notice that H1 is not semantic, because H1 is not natural language. So natural language could be English or Spanish, like one of our natural languages, right? So section is, this is a word that describes itself in natural language. And it's useful for a bunch of reasons. One is that it's easy to understand from humans. Another is that it's actually easier for machines to understand. And it makes it easier for machines like screen readers and tools that assist differently abled people. It makes those tools work better. So another would be actually this is a list, which is not really semantic either, so machines can read that. The label is a good one. Let's do a form. So a form is fairly semantic. It's like a login form, right? And here you could have an input. This would be like username. You do like username, password. I'll skip the password. I think you get the idea. So this will be a username, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be a label. And notice how I put the slash in this one, even though, so this is an opening tag and this is a closing tag. Notice that label and input, they don't have opening and closing tags. They are self-closing. Okay, and then this would be ID, username field, and then I will put username field here. And what I'm telling my browser is that this label is for this input. In this case, I want to say username. So you see label is another semantic tag. And I think input and form are also pretty semantic. So I refresh this, and you see I have the label. So this is a case where this would be helping like a non-sighted user. The screen reader would know that this label is for this input. Okay, great. Hello world, this is my first paragraph, username. And let's just go ahead and make this useful. So yeah, I can also add a button here. So this will be type submit. So what is an input? An input is anything that the user interacts with. And as you'll see, refresh this, that's a button. So these look very different, right? One I can type in, and then one I click. And it doesn't do anything right now, but we'll get to that. So inputs come in all shapes and sizes. There's like checkbox, radio button, sliders, like a calendar. Here, let's see this, HTML calendar. A calendar is another thing. HTML date, maybe date picker, I think that's the right word. Date picker. Yeah, type date. See this? These are developed by the browser itself. And this is another reason that it's easier to code than you think it is. So people are like, ooh, this is so complicated, but it's actually built in if you just use the right input, which is all you gotta do is put a type of date. See, here I did type of submit to make it a button. Let's make it type date, Control S, go to the page, refresh, look at that. See, I have one too. Here, let me show a little bit better on TikTok. Oh golly, I haven't really been showing it well at all. So you can see the hello world, oop. And here's this date picker. All I did was put this input type date. Now I'm going to Control Z, it's going to go back to submit, Control S, F5, refresh the page, and now it's back to a button. And that's what I want. So we've basically discussed HTML. I think we got it at this point. Let's move on to CSS. So right before we move on to CSS, we want HTML boilerplate. Basic HTML document. Great. So the Chrome browser is smart enough that it added some basic stuff that's supposed to be here that I didn't add. But now I want to add it. Technically, everything that I wrote should go inside of the body, and we call it the document body. Why do we call it a document? Because this technically is like a text document. It's an HTML document. It's a file. That's why we call it a document. Okay, boom. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, so what did I add? I added 3 tags. Doc type. So your browser already knows if it's .html, it assumes that it's an HTML file. It's a good practice to put it anyway. There's some cases where, like, if I didn't put .html, the browser might not know that it was an HTML file. And so I just want to tell it up front that it is an HTML file. HTML tag. Hey, if this is an HTML file, why do I need an HTML tag? So what does the HTML tag do? It tells the browser that anything inside of the HTML tag is HTML. And you might say, well, John, everything in this file is HTML. That's just redundant. And that is actually the whole point. Everything in this file doesn't need to be HTML. I'll also add a head tag. And we'll explain what the head tag is in a minute. But just to illustrate the point, we're going to add CSS right here. So the CSS tag is not is not CSS. That would be nifty, but it's the style tag. And inside of the style tag, you write CSS. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here I can say H1 color red. So this, what I've put here, is a different programming language. It's generous to call it a language. Let's see. How does Google define it? It technically is a programming language. It's just not Turing complete. It's a style sheet language, which is a sort of specialty programming language that has a limited scope, limited ability. It's specifically to do things like formatting and colors and font sizes and bold and italics. That's what CSS does. Whenever we talk about style, we're talking about the visual appearance. Okay. So this code right here is CSS. So I have CSS inside of my HTML file. Okay. So I need to tell the browser, hey, I'm about to write CSS so that it can interpret it correctly. And so what happens if I refresh this? Now the H1 is red. What I did here is I told it, find all the H1 tags and color them red. And so that's exactly what happened right here. So that's why we need the HTML tag, is because not everything in the HTML file is HTML. Your browser will assume it is, okay? We showed earlier it was kind of working, because if you're not explicit, the browser will make some assumptions. And one assumption is it's HTML in your HTML file. But we want to be explicit so that we can do stuff like this, include stuff that's not HTML in our HTML file. Namely, we want to include CSS and JavaScript. So I'll do this. I'm not going to write any JavaScript yet, but I'll just show you. The way you include JavaScript is through a script tag. Cool. So now we've got color here. Let's do, oh, and then the body and the head is the other thing to cover. Body is everything you want your user to see. Technically, your user's not going to see JavaScript, so that's not quite true. But we can go with that. Like, let's just say that the script tag is special. And with the exception of the script tag, your user's going to see all this stuff. So the head tag is stuff you don't want your user to see. So I don't, like, let's do this. I just don't want my user to see, like, this text right here, right? Let me put it there so you can see. Like, I don't want them to see this. Okay? So I'm going to put that in the head tag, and I'm going to put it right here in style. The other thing that the head tag does is it loads first. So your browser is going to read this file from the top to the bottom, and by having the style up here in the head, I don't get any flickers, basically. So let me show you what I mean. You're going to have quick eyes to notice this. Keep your eyes on this hello world. You should notice a flicker from black to red. Let's see if I can refresh this. No, it's too fast. I guess the file would have to be a lot bigger for it to be noticeable. So we'll put this back in the head. We can do this with JavaScript instead. It's a good practice to put your JavaScript at the bottom because you want your user to see everything before any of the scripts kick off. So I'll just do a basic alert hi. It's just going to pop up kind of a pop-up that says hi. Well, that's not good because it blocked my rendering. I don't expect that to occur. Let me try. All right, let's do some JavaScript here. So what I'm going to do, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but that's okay. I don't want it to say hello world. I want it to say hello John. And it's going to know John because I'm going to type John right here. And then I'm going to click this button. Boop, it's going to change from hello world to hello John. So how am I going to do this? I'm going to have JavaScript. And here's the button. And we're going to give it an on click. And on click, this is going to say, I can make this up. I can call it whatever I want. This is why programming is so powerful. I'm going to make a function that's going to, and the function is going to happen when I click it. And I just get to make up what this function is called. This is going to say use name. Okay. So on click, use name. Event is a magic variable. Let me make sure that's working, and then I'll speak to it. Cool. Make sure this is working. Okay. My whole form submitted. Let's see. We're gonna put this on the form, not the button. So forms are kind of like meant to go somewhere. Like you log into a website, right? Or what's another case of a form? Like you're registering for a credit card. Or you're not logging into a website, you're just registering for a website. Or you're on some forums and you like submit a post, or you're blogging and you submit a post. Whenever you submit these things, you're like clicking a button, and that's submitting a form, right? So previously I had the on submit event of the button. Here, I'll do it again, and you can see. Watch on this right side right here. You're gonna see a flicker. Did you see that? It showed up, it said event, and then it disappeared really quickly. And the reason for that is, here, I can actually freeze it, debugger. Cool. Nope, that didn't freeze it. Basically, it's submitting the whole form, so there's two events firing at once. That's the reason. So the form is the parent of the submit button. So it's going to take precedence. This is called bubbling. It's like an order of operations thing. You remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally? It's kind of like that. So this will be on, I think it's on submit. Let's see. I might have that name wrong. Yeah. Okay, so we submitted the form. So when I click the submit button, it's trying to submit the form. And that doesn't really make sense because I don't have a place to submit it. Like with Facebook, when you log in, you would submit it to the Facebook server. Or like your blog, you would submit it to your blog. Here, I don't have a server. This is only a web page. So what it does is it just refreshes the page. It seems kind of silly, but that's what happens. So what we want to do is we want to prevent that behavior. So that behavior is the default behavior of the form submission event. So how we disable that, and you would just Google this. You're not expected to memorize this. Although you kind of get a muscle memory. After you do this a bunch of times, you would know. Oh, Logic Bug says, wait, you code in Notepad. Are you online right now? Hey, so Logic Bug, I don't code in Notepad. I code in VS Code. So this is the trial by fire. And I encourage you to go to YouTube and rewatch the stream, because in the beginning, I kind of talked to this. I do the trial by fire in Notepad because this is for a new student who has never coded before. And I want them to feel the pain point, basically. I want them to feel the pain point of Notepad before I give them the benefit of VS Code, because I want them to really appreciate what their IDE is doing for them and why. What about auto refresh and caching for IE RSS feeds? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, RSS feeds, like, the good thing is it sounds like you know a little bit about coding. The bad thing is that's like way out of scope for this exercise. So this exercise is front end only. We're explaining HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's no server involved. And so like RSS feeds are like way out of scope, honestly. But if you have a specific question about RSS, we could pivot over and talk about that. But kind of the generic question like what about RSS feeds, it doesn't really connect to this exercise in particular. But like I said, if you want to ask a specific question, like if you want to troubleshoot something, just let me know. And thanks for coming by, and thanks for the likes. I appreciate that. So where we were is we were saying, man, I'm submitting a form to a server, but I don't have a server, and so it's basically force refreshing my page, and I don't want that. So how do we prevent that default behavior? You just use event.prevent default. And this is something that if you don't know how to do it, you would just Google. And I could Google prevent form submission, right? Stack Overflow is our friend right up at the top. And you can see, well, this is not a good answer. Okay, so they're using the return keyword, which can work. Yeah, this is better though. So, okay, note 1 is read all the way through the answer because prevent default is mentioned at the very bottom. And note 2 is don't always just accept the first answer necessarily. Here's vanilla JavaScript, event.prevent default. That's what we want to do. And also be sure to read the question because this window.history.back is specific to this guy's question. Give that guy a thumbs up too. Cool, so I'm going to close this, and we are back to this debugger. Okay, and we can see I have the event right here. This is a bit of JavaScript, console.log. On the right here, this is called DevTools, and this is the DevTools console. Console.log will write that information on this console. And so the normal user will not see this. This is something that is a developer tool. That's why we call it DevTools. So you can like see what's going on behind the scenes with your JavaScript without messing stuff up for the user. Thanks for the finger heart. That's awesome. Okay, so we confirmed that prevent default is working, basically. Let's hit play. Boom. Get rid of this. Refresh the page. Submit. It's all working. Okay. Let's see. I can get rid of this. Now, what do I want to do? Yep, and you see it doesn't wipe it out now. Previously, it wiped it out. But now that we're preventing default, it retains it. So now what I want to do is actually use what the user submitted. So here I'll create a variable. I could use var, let, or const. Var is intended to be globally scoped, which we don't want to do in this case. We just want it for the scope of this function. What do I mean by that? What I mean is when the function is done running, the browser can forget. Basically, the browser can forget about whatever variable I declared. Not only is that okay, that's actually what we want to do. Let and const both have that functionality, block level scoping we call it. But let is intended to mean that you're going to change the value over time. So like I could say let counter equal 0, and then I could say counter equals counter plus 1, and that would increase the value of counter from 0 to 1. If I use const instead of let, I would get an error. So const is for constant. You're not supposed to change the value, basically. And that's our use case here. So these are the 3 ways to declare a variable, and the best candidate for us in this case is const. So we got const, and this is going to be my username. So what should I call it? Let's just call it what it is, username. And that's going to be event.value. So event is the submission event. When the user clicks, that's creating a browser event. And the value that they typed right here is going to be included in the value property of that event. So this syntax where I use a period, remember syntax is the characters that we write. That's all it means. So the syntax of the period is a property accessor. It's a fancy way of saying we're getting the value out of the event. We're accessing the value property. So value would be considered a property of an object. You think about like this hat. Like the hat has a color, it has a shape, it has a weight, width, height, length. These are all properties of the hat. So how would we write that in JavaScript? We would create an object. We'd say hat, and then we would give it properties. We would say color, foo, or let's say gray, because foo doesn't mean anything to you. Height is 10 inches, and so on and so forth. In this case, I'm going to update the web page momentarily. First, I'm just making sure it works. So this is a technique of development. One small change, check it. One small change, check it. Don't make a ton of changes and then try to check it. If you make a ton of changes and try to check it, you're probably going to have an issue and you're not going to know which change caused it. So by doing one small change and checking it, you get a great benefit, which is you know the root cause. You know the change that you made that created the issue, and that helps you fix it really fast. Okay, so I'm just going to check the username. The other thing, here's another technique. Picture in your mind what you expect to happen before you do it. That way, if it works, you have confirmation. If it doesn't work, then basically you can go fix it. What you don't want to do is it does something, and then you're like, did that work? Like, I'm not really sure. Let me think about, what did I even want it to do? Is that okay? I don't know. You want to be able to quickly know, oh, no, that's not okay, right? So what I would like to happen here is I would like on the console, the username should show up. That's it. So I'm going to save here, come over here, refresh the page. Here I'm going to type John, click it, boom. Username undefined. See, that's not okay. So what that means is that the event value here is undefined. And that does make sense because this is a form, not an input. So I'm trying to get the value of the whole form, which is not a thing. What I really want is I want the value of this input, not the whole form. So I have two ways to do that. Two ways to get a single input value from a form. Form way, and then the direct way. So the form way, let me just go back to the event here. It should show the whole event. Okay, so I have a submit event. So the form way is that I get the whole form. So here's the target form. You can see it's even highlighting it for me. And then you can see under the form are inputs. So let's try this again. Instead of event.value, let's do event.form. Okay, refresh, check that. The form is undefined. That's no good. Username is event. Oh, it's target, isn't it? So the target is form. It's not dot form. So event.target, and that should be a form. By the way, the 2 slashes here, that's called a comment. So this is how you can write notes to yourself and other developers without showing anything on the screen. Okay, so here's the form. Great. Now, let's put a debugger here. What I want to do is check event.form, event.target.value. Doesn't make sense. Inputs. I want to get the inputs out of this form. How do I do it? Get element. Yeah, I thought there was like a way to directly access the inputs. Let's try it like this. It's not showing it, but let's just try it. Username. Yep, there it is. So because we have the name username, I can just do form.username. Now notice that when I look at this form and I expand it, it doesn't actually tell me that. So that's kind of confusing. Got to head off the ice train from today's work. Hey, thanks, Logic Bug. See you later. Hey, you can call me Zach. What's up, Zach? Thanks for dropping by. So I can do this event.target.username. It works, but like, how confusing is that? Okay. So this is the form way to do it. Form way would be event.target.username. So that will work, but I'm going to say that the better way would be the direct way. And we can also call this the explicit way. Oops. Explicit way. And that would be, let's give this sucker an ID. It already has an ID. So ID is an HTML attribute. You see, here we talked about the left angle bracket and the right angle bracket makes a tag. So here we have an HTML tag. This is a head tag, a body tag. So those are tags. Tags are allowed to have attributes, and we've been using them, but we didn't really talk about them. Whenever you say ID equals double quote, type equals double quote, for equals double quote, that pattern of something equals double quote, you are declaring an attribute. So you're giving your HTML attributes. These are all attributes. Just like hat has color and height and all those things, those would be properties in JavaScript, and it's a similar idea, but it's HTML, not JavaScript. So the idea is attributes. So ID is a special attribute, and it needs to be unique. That's the whole point of ID. It's an identifier. I tell you the ID, you know exactly who I'm talking about. It's explicit, it's direct, okay? So here, we're gonna do document.get element by ID, and then give it the ID of username field. I don't know about you, but this to me is a lot more readable and understandable than this way. So I actually prefer this way. So let's try this. Gonna save that, remove that debugger, refresh my screen. You see here I got that username field. So it's working so far, one change at a time. So we got the username field. Here is username field, we could call it. Let's call it input username. How about that? Okay. And then username should be input username dot value. It's just the value that I wrote in here. So let's try it again. So refresh the page, and you can see username John. Oh, let's show y'all for TikTok. Ooh. Username John is on the console. I need to get like a wide lens or something over here. Thanks for all the likes. I really appreciate that. So now that we got username John, by the way, if you're on TikTok and if it's hard for you to see, feel free to jump over to YouTube or Twitch, and I'm also streaming to LinkedIn. So feel free to jump over, and that should be a much clearer view for you. Okay, cool. So up till now, we've got John showing up, but I want this to show up, hello, John. I don't want it to be over here where the user doesn't see it. I want it to be exactly where they do see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the heading element the exact same way. I'm going to give it an ID. So I'm going to call this hello heading. I'm going to call this top heading. Okay. So here's the input username. There's the value. Now let's do top heading. Document.get element by ID. What's document again? Document is the whole HTML document. It's like a document, a file system document. It's a file, it's a document. So document.get element by ID, and this is going to be top-heading is what we called it. Does that make sense? So now, let's make sure we're getting that top heading element, refresh the page, boom, and here's the top heading. So now I want to change the text of that. So I'm going to say top heading dot inner text equals. And if you're from a math background, you might be like, well, this is weird. Hello plus username. If you're from a math background, you might be like, this is weird because they're not equal. So this is like a false equation, right? But this is not a mathematical equation. We're not doing a mathematical comparison. What we're doing is we are telling the program, this is what it is going to be now. So we're actually updating. That's what we're really doing. Got an asterisk here because it's unsaved. Control S to save it. F5 to refresh the page. John, enter. Hello, John. Oh, I need a space. So here you can see I'm doing string concatenation is what we call it. It's just adding strings. Hello, John. I'm going to use a different syntax using a backtick, also called a grave tick. So this is a different way of doing the same thing. This is a different syntax and a different implementation, a different approach of getting the same user functionality. And this is not concatenation, this is called interpolation. So the $ is the $, and then the character right here is called a brace, a left brace. And what this syntax does is it takes a JavaScript variable and injects it into that location. So instead of concatenating or adding things, we are taking the kind of like base recipe and then injecting our variable. But we end up with the same thing. We end up with hello, John. Let's refresh. Hello, world. Hello, John. And you can see this time I do have the space. I could have done the space with concatenation, but it seemed simpler, cleaner, less keystrokes and less characters if I just did it this way. So you can see how it's injecting John in there. So what have we got so far? We've done HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it's been 45 minutes. So really, this is the trial by fire. Let's do a couple more things. Let's do a little more CSS and a little more JavaScript. So here I have an input button. It's a submit button for this form, but I can also have a button all by itself that's not part of a form. And there, we don't call it an input, we just call it a button, because inputs are supposed to go with forms. But a button can be off by itself. So this will be add number, add random number. Or I'll say write random number. Okay? And then we'll give it an on click. So here's the on submit event, and this is an on click event. They're different events. And here we're going to append number, to number list. Okay. We'll have a new section. Just a new section of the page, and this section will be a number list. Here we're going to use H2. That's also a heading, but it's smaller. So we got an H2. And so this is an unordered list, and this is a list item that just says 1. Boom. So you see what that looks like? Ew, this looks so gross. I want there to be more space above this button. Okay. Let's use CSS. So here's the button, and we'll give it a class. And we'll call this button with spacing. Button with top spacing specifically. So this class is going to allow me to bind CSS. That is, I'm going to style it using this class. So we come over here. Previously, we said H1, which is selecting the H1 tag. That's one way you can select in CSS. Here, I'm going to do a period syntax and button with top spacing. That's called a class selector. So you can select elements in different ways in CSS. Here, we just want to get those elements that have this class. And then here we'll use margin top, and we'll say 10 pixels. Let's do 8 pixels. Refresh. You see I got more space there. I'm actually going to double that. 16 pixels. Cool, so I gave it some space on top, right? I'm actually going to give it more than that. 24 or 32. Let's see. I think that looks good. What do you think? Thank you for all the likes. Got over 5,000. That's really great. Cool. So now we've done some more CSS. Remember, the trial by fire, you're not expected to remember this. We're going to fly through it, and later you're going to learn in depth all the different CSS rules. You're like, John, how do you know this? Well, a few different ways. One is, if I don't know it, I can just Google it. Let's Google add space to top of HTML element. This is a Google search, right? See, you can't always take the first advice because that answer up there is terrible. But let's go Stack Overflow. We trust Stack Overflow. Learning how to make a simple page. Give that guy an upvote. You can apply margin to either the body or the big box element. You see margin top. So that would be one way. I don't know necessarily to use margin. I go find out, I Google it. Googling is the #1 developer skill. What's up, Whittington? Thanks for joining. But the other way is muscle memory. Like, I've done this so much, I just picked it up. And you don't have to pick it up, right? Like this, if you can't remember that it's called margin top, that doesn't make you a bad developer. Like, if anyone ever fails you on an interview because you forgot that this was called margin top, call me, okay? I'll take care of it. That's not a reason to fail somebody. But the third thing is that, so along with the muscle memory thing, this is just really common. Margin is like a really common thing you do in CSS. So like, you're gonna pick it up quick in that period where you're actually studying CSS. So don't freak out that like you don't know. The trial by fire, we're flying through it, giving you a big vision of what can be done, and later we'll drill in and you'll pick up all of these things, and it's gonna become like writing an English paper to you. I mean, I think it's more fun than writing an English paper personally, but you know, I'm not a communications major. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to add button, and look, it's a bullet because it's an unordered list, so it's like a bulleted list, and we want to add new bullets, bullet, bullet, bullet. So let's go get that guy. We have this section, number list section, and then this will get an ID, and we'll call it numbered list. Okay, so we're going to have a new function. Remember, we are doing on click, we're going to append number to list. So let's go get append number to list. Bam. We have a magic event that we know happens inside of the on click event. Nope, I don't need that event. I don't need it. It's there, but I just don't need it, so I'm going to delete it. Even though it's there, I'm just going to ignore it. What I want to do is get that list element, so it's called numbered list, and then I want to create a new, this is going to be a new bullet document.create element. We're going to call, and that is going to be specifically a UL type element, or sorry, LI, just like this guy, LI. Then we are going to make a random number, and this is the math.random. I think it's just math.random. Let's double check. Here you can use this as a playground. That's one of the things you can do in the DevTool console. So let's do math.random. Boom, there it is. And I don't want any gross numbers like that, so we're going to multiply by 10. You can see now I got 9. And then we are going to just round it. So math.round. Cool, so it rounds it to 10. And you can see it's giving me a random number between like 0 and 10. It might end up being between 1 and 10. I'm not sure about that. Cool. So let's grab that little JavaScript there. And this random number is that expression, math.round. There's like an order of operations going on. So first, inside the parentheses, we get the random number. Then we multiply it by 10, and then we round that number. So then we're going to say list.innerText equals random number, and then we're going to say list.append, sorry, that's new bullet.text. New bullet.intertext is the random number, and then list.append new bullet. So we're going to append the new element to the end there. And let's do it. Let's see if this works. Oh no, identifier has already been declared. So that didn't work. Oh, because I said const again. That's a problem. Boom. So do you see, it thought I was trying to declare new bullet again, but it's already been declared. So that was an error. Append number. Cool. Refresh. There we go. And you can see we're appending the number. So there you go. We've done some CSS, some JavaScript. Let's do one last one. Let's get the whole body tag, go out with a bang here. The entire body, we're going to give it a background color. Light blue. And I can just put it just like that. Boom. See that? That'll be it. And there's so many ways that you can change how a web page looks. Don't worry about memorizing the technical stuff. Think about it it's great to look at it with fresh eyes. Think about it as a designer or a user or somebody who's not technical. Just in plain English, what would you like to do? This should be your workflow. Think about it in plain English and go to Google, and that will tell you the technical thing to do. So just as a user, I would say, man, I want to change the color of the background. Change color of web page background. You see, just search it. Again, first answer not good. Let's look for Stack Overflow. W3 Schools is all right. One of those few things that you do need to memorize is you need to memorize the websites that you trust. Okay, Stack Overflow, you can trust them. And so you see CSS backgrounds, and they tell you right up front. They even picked light blue. Imagine that. And you can also do like a hex value. So let's do one of these, RGB. This is another way to write a color, is using RGB syntax. And that's just bright red. Red, green, blue. I like my light blue more. And I think that does it. So that does it. All we would do now is we would go to GitHub. So let's do that. GitHub, I've already created an account. You might need to create an account. Plus button, new repository. This is trial by fire. This is basic web page. Public, add a readme, add a git ignore, sure. License, open source. MIT is a good open source license. It's not letting me create that repository. I wonder why. Oh, I didn't pick which git ignore. Sorry about that. I don't need a git ignore. What does a git ignore do? It tells it to ignore certain files in my repository. Like if I had a list of passwords, I wouldn't want to put that public for the world to see. So I would put it in my git ignore, that file name. So here's the trial by fire code. Grab this thing right here. You need to install Git. Let's go to Google. You'll stay install Git for GitHub. And right up top is GitHub. And it'll tell you how to install Git. There's the installer, right, for Windows. I've already done that. So what I can do is, there's a few ways to do this. One is using VS Code. One is using Tortoise Git. Let's use VS Code, because at some point you should use VS Code. This is a bit of command line stuff. So again, you don't need to learn all this right now. You'll eventually learn it. So I would add, here's my GitHub, and I will git clone trial by fire. So what does this do? See, now I have a folder called trial by fire. And if I double click that, here's the license and the README. This is the stuff that I just made on the GitHub website I just cloned it on my computer. Does that make sense? That's what clone does. Now, here's my hello world code. I need to put that file in this folder. Just drag it, just put it there, boom. For some reason, there's two of them. That's kind of weird. I'll delete the other one in a minute. Now, if I git, so this is git status. Oh, I need to cd trial by fire. Git status. And you can see in red text, hello world. It says untracked file, use git add to include it. So let's git add hello-world.html, enter, git status again. Now it's green. Now I'll git commit -m for message, and I'll say initial commit. So that basically saves it. Like in a video game, I just saved. But I don't just want to save. I want to send it to GitHub. So that I use push. So you save it and then you push it. Now let's go look at GitHub, refresh the screen. Now GitHub has my file. Very last thing, let's go to settings, go to GitHub pages, and enable the main branch. And now I can go to this website. This website doesn't work, but fear not. It's because the file is called hello world. So in that URL, add hello world at the end. Oh no, I actually thought that was going to work. Oh, okay, it just took a second, sorry. Yeah, so sometimes it takes a second for the GitHub pages to work. So now I can send this to anyone. You, the person who's watching on TikTok, or the people watching on Twitch, you can visit this URL and like you can go see that website now. And that's how quickly you can get a basic HTML web page, and that's for free. I don't have to pay any money for this. So I can have a portfolio for the world to see totally for free. And that wraps it up for the trial by fire. We're at a minute and or an hour and 3 minutes for the stream. But I think once you take the introductory remarks out and clean it down, this was easily under an hour. And if you look at the coding portion, not the Git and GitHub stuff, I think we're like around 45 minutes or less. So that is the lightning speed, just kind of quick view about how to make a web page. And the whole, let's return to the curriculum and recap. So this is the last lesson in the intro section. And the whole point of this is to understand the big picture. And if you feel like you didn't get the details, that's totally intentional. This is just to give you a feel for the big picture of what we're doing. Then we're going to dive in specifically to HTML. A lot of the tags, you're not expected to memorize them, but we're going to talk about them. And like different aspects of HTML, things like accessibility, how do forms work, like what are attributes. We kind of like mention them as needed, but we didn't really systematically investigate them, right? So that is not written yet, but that's like the whole HTML section. So here's the understanding the master plan section. The next would be HTML. Then would be CSS and JavaScript, and then there is a soft skills section and a job search section. So after you learn to code, we still want to give you some soft skills, and then there are a whole set of skills specific to the job search, where it's like, how do I write my resume? How do I blast it out? Who do I blast it out to? How do I get certifications? Let's get some certifications, LinkedIn skill assessments, and Indeed.com skill assessments. All of this is related to the job search. How do I actually do an interview? Like, what's a coding interview look like? Let's do some practice coding interviews, behavioral interview, and the other pieces of that. So that's all to be done, but I think now you have a really great preview. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. And Latterly is currently free. It's not going to be free for long. Because I keep adding content, and I think we're getting to the point where there's enough good content to start charging for it. So this trial by fire here, when it's added to the course, it's going to be a cleaned up version of the stream. There's going to be a lot of stuff that I can take out, right? So that it's a lot faster and it's getting to the meat. So that curation service is like part of the value of like this Latterly course. And sign up for now. It's free for now. Latterly.teachable.com. And I would say, hey, hop in there while it's free, because like I'm gonna start charging soon, basically. Yeah, and I hope you'll stick around for like the stream next week, and we'll get started on HTML in depth. You can go to my YouTube channel and review a previous stream. Let me show you. The TikTok watch party. Everything that's going to be in my HTML section has already been covered on TikTok. It's just scattered all around. So the TikTok watch party, I organized that, all the different little TikToks, into a list in these different sections. So like here's the HTML section. So I'm not literally gluing those TikToks together, but I'm basically gluing those TikToks together. I'm going to take the information they contain and turn that into a YouTube video. And that's going to be like the HTML lessons. So we talk about accessibility, some different tags that are important, what are forms, what else do we talk about? Semantic HTML, what it is and why it matters, stuff like that. Yeah, and I'm looking at TikTok, I'm looking at Twitch and YouTube, and I don't see any outstanding questions. I'll hang out for like 10 more seconds. Feel free to ask anything, but if I don't see a question, that'll be it. And thanks again for tuning in. All right, y'all. If it's evening where you are, have a good evening. If it's morning where you are, have a good morning. And